Hello everybody and welcome to chapter 3. We are talking about the nature of supervision, healthcare, and everywhere. We're really going to hit the highlights of this chapter. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail in your text. Definitely read the full chapter. These chapters are relatively short, but again, I'm going to hit the highlights. Our first slide says, born to watch your work. These words convey the impression that overseeing is not real work, a view held mostly by people who are not and have never been supervisors. And so what that's talking about is at the beginning of each chapter, you're going to have a quote. And at the beginning of chapter 3, it says, as we are born to work, so others are born to watch over us while we are working. And this quote's by Oliver Goldsmith. And so if you flip over to page 47, you're actually in the Born to Work or Watch section. And it talks about how some people are born to work or born to supervise. And in that paragraph, that last paragraph in that section, it says, although we cannot say that someone is born to work or born to supervise, we can, however, suggest that supervision is an activity for which a person can exhibit a talent. Many people are called on to become supervisors because they have exhibited talent for certain kinds of work, usually the same kinds of work they're asked to supervise. However, talent for doing manual, technical, or professional work is no guarantee of the presence of talent for supervision. And so you have a dual role as a supervisor, and that's where we're talking about the supervisor's two hats. You've got your functional specialist, which is the person that is the worker responsible for doing the basic work of the department. Your registered nurses, your lab techs, your dietitians, your physical therapist, a maintenance mechanic, an accountant, an HIM professional. These people are functional specialists. They do the work. Then you've got your management generalist, and these are concerned with activities that are common to many departments and to most situations in which someone must guide and direct the work of others. So regardless of whether the manager began as a nurse, a technologist, an accountant, a mechanic, or whatever, running the department requires the manager to be concerned with staffing, scheduling, personnel management, budgeting, and other activities that apply to many departments. So the classic problem for the supervisor. On one hand, you've got your functional specialist hat that usually fits better than your management generalist hat. And if you flip over to page 48, toward the top, the second paragraph there, a natural leaning toward one of the supervisor's two roles is encouraged by the nature of management itself. Management is not nearly as well defined in its own right as many working specialties. When considering specialties such as nursing, accounting, and engineering, we're able to categorize these rather neatly according to certain characteristics. We associate each with an expected amount of education and training and perhaps the awarding of a diploma, degree, or license. Management, as a separate field, however, defies the kind of definition provided for working specialties. Although a few people trained as so-called management generalists may be identified in the middle and upper levels, in management lower levels, there are no sound criteria for defining a manager without constantly raising the question, manager of what? Thus, we are not especially well prepared to think of management as a legitimate field in its own right, an occupation requiring a certain amount of skill, education, and training. We readily recognize that to be a manager, one must manage something. This prompts us to consider the individual's functional specialty. It also leads to another consideration. Who is best qualified to supervise the work of the department? Should this be the role of the functional specialist or the management generalist? Is it more important for the supervisor to be knowledgeable of all aspects of the department's work, or should the supervisor's strengths lie in the general functions of management? And so the classic problem exists is that most supervisors have been well prepared in their functional specialties, but little or not at all prepared to manage. And this is where we come into the Peter principle. And so starting at the bottom of 48, Essentially, all first-time supervisors have worked as functional specialists. Although it's true that some people begin their working careers as supervisors, this usually occurs in the natural two-act situations in which the person enters a small department as both a supervisor and a worker. Usually, this person is offered a supervisory position because of past performance in some specialty, and ordinarily it's the better workers who are promoted to supervisor. However, the fact that a person is a good worker does not guarantee that this same person will be a good supervisor. Dropping down in that section on page 49. In brief, his principle states, and we're talking about Lawrence J. Peter, in an hierarchy, every person tends to rise to his level of incompetence. Now, what does this mean? This says the outstanding worker at any level is likely to be promoted to the next level in the hierarchy. Because if you're a good worker, you probably deserve a promotion and you're going to be promoted. If you continue to be a good worker and you continue to do great work, you may be promoted again. What this is saying is this process can continue until the individual reaches a level where their performance is mediocre at best. Then they're stuck. Their promotions stop and they're left probably until retirement at a notch above the level of proven capability for good work. So they did good work, got a promotion, did good work, got another promotion, and then their work just kind of petered off and they didn't do as well, so then they're stuck, and so they rose to the level of their incompetence. And then we end up in the working trap. This is a hazard for every supervisor who has non-managerial duties as well as managerial duties. The bottom of page 49, much of the reason why any person is titled and paid as a manager is to see that a certain amount of work gets done through the efforts of other people. This requires the supervisor to primarily be a member of management. Any person charged with the responsibility for directing the activities of others is a manager and must firmly believe this is so. It's all too easy for the supervisor to feel and behave more as a worker than a manager. This is understandable when half or more of the supervisor's duties may be non-managerial to begin with. However, this leads to a state of favoring one hat over the other, spending too much of the time thinking and doing as a worker rather than behaving as a manager. And so falling into the working trap can leave a supervisor's time and energy stretched too thin over numerous technical tasks, while some of the department's workers remain underutilized for lack of solid supervisory direction. All right, so skipping over into the text, we're moving over to page 51, and we're talking about the responsibilities of healthcare management. First, management is responsible to the organization's patients to assure that these all-important people receive the best possible care at the lowest possible cost. At the same time, management is responsible to the organization's employees and must recognize their reasonable needs for security, approval, and a sense of accomplishment, assurance of their reasons for being there, and fair treatment and fair compensation for their efforts. Management is also responsible to the Board of Trustees in their legal capacity as guardians of the organizational resources. Beyond the trustees, management is responsible to the community for determining how to best meet current healthcare needs. And to follow the thread of responsibility completely through to the end, we can also say that management has an important responsibility to itself to continually strive to upgrade its capabilities and adapt as necessary to the constantly changing healthcare environment. And so, the end product of all business is people. If we flip over to page 52, it states that first sentence, it was mentioned earlier that the end product of all business is people. In healthcare and everywhere else, it is necessary to consider the ultimate customer for a product or service. And so when we talk about our mass production manufacturing enterprises, customers likely to be remote, unseen, unknown, and even though there may be health and safety implications associated with these products or services. But in healthcare, the customer is the patient, and the patient is here and now. They're right in front of us. The service is hands-on and personal, and as such, it's of immediate importance to the patient. In healthcare, then, much more so than in most other endeavors, there is an immediate focus on the customer and some quality considerations. Patients are people and employees are people. To the healthcare supervisor, patients and employees exist in the here and now, in a face-to-face relationship with the supervisor. Since the vast majority of the problems of healthcare supervision are people problems, the nature of healthcare supervision can truly be described as getting things done through people. Regardless, and I'm dropping down to the bottom of 52, regardless of the organizational environment within which supervision is practiced, successful supervision comes only through conscientious effort. A considerable degree of dedication to the job is necessary, but no one should feel it necessary to become a workaholic. The person who gives everything to the job to the exclusion of all else is most likely using the job as an excuse to fill other needs. Dropping down. At the end of management development class, in which numerous techniques were discussed, a supervisor said, "I could really get a lot of good work done around here if it weren't for all the problems that pop up every day." Well, when you find yourself feeling that kind of frustration, hey, me personally, been there, done that. I could have got a whole lot of stuff done at my job if all these little things didn't pop up that I had to go take care of. But when you find yourself feeling this way, the problems, those nagging, unanticipated, annoying difficulties that seem to spring up day after day, sometimes hour after hour, they're a large part of the reason your job exists. If there were fewer problems, fewer supervisors are needed. To a considerable extent, the supervisor's a frustration fighter. If the frustrations did not exist, necessary tasks might well be accomplished without supervisory intervention. The day-to-day problems do exist, however, and hour-to-hour and moment-to-moment operating decisions have to be made. And the person who must make most of these decisions is the first-line supervisor, the final link between the best intentions of the organization and the actual performance of patient care. And so that's why healthcare is different. Your patient is in front of you. Healthcare is hands-on and personal. Now let's talk about appreciating difficulty. We're over here on page 53. And we're going to talk about whether it's just job. And we're going to talk about career ladders and tracks. Is a supervisor simply an early step along a career ladder? Maybe. Some who enter supervision will see the position as just a job, which is a means of earning a living until they can move on to something more in line with their long-term range plans. Some others, however, will regard their entry into supervision as their first step on a career ladder they wish to climb, whether in their present organization or another organization in the same business. A successful and fulfilling career usually does not just happen. Rarely, if ever, does going with the flow carry you where you are best suited or potentially most fulfilled. Rather, those who go furthest in the direction that is best for them usually have a fairly clear vision of their intended direction. They know where they want to go. So let's talk about these healthcare ladders. Within certain areas of healthcare, the available career ladders or career paths are perceived as both limited and limiting. There are a number of relatively short career ladders in healthcare. For example, if you're in a mid-sized hospital, the entire career ladder in diagnostic imaging or the clinical laboratory may exist of only 2 or 3 levels, including the department management level. When a person reaches the top of a short career ladder, there are but a few steps remaining. Another hospital department that has a longer career ladder, general management or administration, or another organization that has a longer career ladder in your specialty. So let's talk about facing upward or facing downward. At any given time, the supervisor may tend to face upward toward higher management and the rest of the hierarchy, or face downward toward the work group. There are needs causing one to do either at any particular time, and there are tendencies in the individual that favor facing either upward or downward. The pressures to face upward or downward are rarely equal, and there are no guarantees that one is facing in the appropriate direction at any time. The downward-facing pressures consist of the needs of one's direct reporting employees. So those are the employees that report to you. The needs of the department's clients, patients, or customers, and generally all of the responsibilities of one's present position. Downward is in fact the direction in which most managers of people should face most of the time. This is especially true of first-line supervisors who are often as much workers as managers. It's necessary to face toward the staff, to in fact be a functioning part of the staff, to best fulfill the responsibilities of the position. But downward facing runs counter to some tendencies that result from pressures encouraging supervisors to face upward. And so facing upward is a natural inclination of many supervisors. In organizational life, it quickly becomes apparent that one's rewards and recognition comes from above. Therefore, to enhance one's chances of advancing, it is necessary to be known and appreciated at higher levels. And so upward facing is appropriate. Some is even essential, but it must be accomplished in ways that do not detract from the supervisor's responsibilities to their employees. And really and truly, it comes down to being a balancing act. Many individuals experience the need to be loyal to something or someone, even if only to themselves. This need frequently translates to dedication to one's own career or occupation. It has become especially evident that many technical, professional, and specialized employees identify more with an occupation than with an organization. And balancing one's own needs with the needs of the organization can be difficult. The majority of supervisory, managerial, and professional jobs are by nature somewhat open-ended. There's always something to be done, whether urgent, essential, marginally important, or simply desirable. There's usually sufficient work to be done on such jobs that one runs the risk of following an endless thread from task to task to task in a never-ending quest to get caught up. In this direction lies the risk of being consumed by the job. A genuine balance of service to the job and to oneself is a necessity for personal health and survival, and neither completely selfish nor selfless is appropriate. So, how do you make yourself valuable? In pursuing goals of your career advancement, it surely helps your cause if you have a supervisor who delegates well, truly empowers, and generally believes in employee development. In fact, a good manager with strong feelings for employee development, confident, and unafraid of having sharp, strong, fast-moving subordinates is one of the greatest advantages you can have in your job. So this is talking about having a supervisor that's not holding you down, not keeping you in your hole, that's willing to let you branch out and take on a little more responsibility. And so one way in which you can be valuable is to know enough about your manager's job to make yourself useful. Make it easier for your manager to delegate some items to you. And much of what you may be able to do will, of course, depend on the kind of manager you answer to. One of the most valuable functions you can perform, preventing your boss from making an obvious mistake or stepping unknowingly into a dangerous situation, will be appreciated by a strong, confident manager. I'm going to end this chapter with this statement. As one middle manager expressed it, "Sometimes I'm just plain wrong. And at those times, I appreciate a subordinate who has the nerve to tell me I'm about to shoot myself in the foot." All right, so again, read the whole chapter 3. Be familiar with the concepts. You did have those 3 key terms at the beginning: your functional specialist, management generalist, and the Peter Principle. Understand what the Peter Principle means. And so for the rest of this module, we're going to move on to chapter 4, and that'll be a separate lecture. Thanks.